Hello there and welcome back to Bandits Ballads. In the last chapter, Balon Blacktide began waging war on the Northern Empire, and after defeating dozens of their lords, he ultimately found himself cornered by an army twice as large as his. If this were to happen on accident, there's no way any of us would survive the encounter, but we deliberately lured the imps here to fight them in the cliffs and use the rocky terrain to our advantage. This was by far the largest battle I've ever fought, so without delaying any further, let's jump right into the thick of it. First, I'll borrow my wife's battle axe. It might come in handy. Before the violence begins, there's several steps we need to take if we are to ensure our survival. First, we must conduct a brief survey of the battlefield. As expected, there's a plateau on one side, a beach on the other, impassable cliffs in between, and a couple of choke points connecting the two. It's only natural I'd turn one of those choke points into a killing zone. Next step, positioning the troops. Archers are the main damage dealers, so they're placed on the far end of the beach. The infantry's task is to keep the bottleneck clogged, while the cavalry has been placed on the right side of the archers, but they will dismount to join the front lines and leave their horses behind to serve as meat shields that can potentially slow down the enemy's flanking maneuvers, should they attempt something like that. As for my own horse, I didn't want to lose it, so I tucked it away in a safe corner behind a cliff, where it wouldn't be hit by a stray arrow and scared off the field. If I need to mount up, I'll know where to find it. Once the trap was set, there was one last thing I needed to take care of: going in front of my troops and rallying them with an inspiring speech. The Imperials fear us, brothers, and they hope to wash us all away with their greater numbers. Falter and they shall get what they want, but if you stand tall, I promise you, they'll crash against your shields like waves against the cliffside. Hold the line and show no fear. And with that taken care of, 'twas time to get back in formation. Soon enough, the enemies began trickling down on us. Slowly at first, just testing the waters. They were apprehensive and only the idiots dared to get close, for we were deeply entrenched. When the first one arrived, I went after him, but he quickly changed his mind and attempted to return to his friends when he saw what awaits. But then, I caught a glimpse of what's coming and decided to assume a safer position to the left of the shield wall and just wait. It didn't take long for all of them to come pouring through, and as they did, I ordered my infantry to unleash their thrown weapons, hoping to cut a few of them down before we make contact. That didn't do much. In mere seconds, hostiles were already scraping their faces on our shields, but as long as we don't flinch, none of them shall pass. As I've already implied, the strategy for winning this fight is simple. The rangers shoot the imps like fish in a barrel while the infantry holds their ground. But despite my rallying speech, I was certain that if I were to fall, my men would panic, break formation and try to do things their own way, and we'd lose. As such, I had to ignore the injuries I've suffered in the previous battle and walk the fine line between staying conscious for my men so that the aforementioned doesn't happen, and actually contributing to the fight, which would potentially put me in harm's way. Best I can do is slice and dice until I suffer a few more injuries, and if I'm still standing, I'll pull back and stay safe. The carnage that ensued in the following few minutes brought back memories of a story I read some time ago in a book that I stole from an aspiring maester as we boarded a ship that was bound to Old Town. That's a story in and of itself, but the one in the book took place in an imaginary land with people who have never existed. A tale about 300 men who fought against an army of millions. It was called The Battle at the Hot Gates, and the terrain described within those pages was a lot like this. Long story short, the brave 300 died eventually, but they killed thousands, and their sacrifice bought time for the rest of their country to unite under one banner and repel the invaders. While I doubt anything like that could ever realistically happen, there's the actual story of the 3,000 Unsullied of Quohor, who stood against 25,000 Dothraki Screamers. In their pride and contempt for footmen, the Horde refused to outflank the smaller, heavy infantry force and opted instead for a direct frontal assault. 18 times the Dothraki charged, and 18 times they were repelled, and after the Khal himself was slain, alongside his sons, his blood riders, and 12,000 screamers, whatever remained of the Khalasar conceded, and each man cut off his braid and laid it at the feet of the 600 surviving Unsullied as a show of respect. I don't quite understand why the remaining 13,000 refused to commit and finish off those 600. They only lost half their force and defeated 80% of the defenders. Surely they wouldn't have lost more than an additional 3,000 to win the battle and plunder the riches of Quohor. But if I were to venture a guess, I'd say that they weren't expecting to lose more than 1,000 people in the initial assault and, well, 12,000 corpses later, their morale was crushed. But you may wonder, why am I telling you these stories? Why not talk about the battle itself? Well, I believe similar events are a bit more interesting to discuss. Instead of describing how I struck an Imperial in the head, took a step back to dodge another's sword, and then sliced his shoulder. Gruesome details are usually left out of the history books and troubadour songs. Anyway, after winning a brief duel against a legionary, I realized that he was the last of the infantry, and all that remained of the enemy force were about 100 archers. Easy prey for my shield brothers. All they had to do was charge. I didn't want to leave all the fun to them, but before I even scored a single kill, the enemy's morale was completely depleted and the few that were left attempted to flee. Couldn't let that happen, unfortunately. As they tried to run, I cut them down, one after the other, until only one was left standing. As his heels were kicking his buttocks, I casually trotted behind him, escorting him off the battlefield and telling him to remember what he witnessed here today, and to warn his compatriots of what's coming. Will they stop harassing me? Probably not, but every time they encounter my serpent banner, they'll be too demoralized to put up a proper fight. At least, that's what I hope. When it was all said and done, our battle scribe counted 38 more kills to my name. Not the most I've ever gotten in a single battle. That record was set in the previous one, but still, pretty good. And because the Archons made this grave error, 404 of their soldiers will never be found fighting the Ironborn ever again. But the most surprising part of the battle report is finding out that only 33 of my men have fallen, with less than half of our losses being permanent. The rest would just need to get a bit of rest and they'd be ready for at least one more fight. As we were recovering the wounded, we found the 4 Imperial Lords who attacked us still alive and breathing. As punishment for their impertinence, they've been imprisoned and are expected to pay ransom, but for that, I needed to sneak into the nearest town. Easy as pie. Unfortunately, all they were worth was 10,000 dinars, with the rest of their soldiers fetching another 5k. That's disappointing. The loot wasn't that great either. I estimate 30,000 at most, but then again, I'm no mathematician. I may have been an oddity among the Ironborn for knowing how to read, but counting numbers, too advanced for me. Anyway, there's not much to do in a town when you're wearing a disguise, so after wrapping up whatever business I had inside, I quickly departed, and as soon as I walked out the gates of Makeb, I noticed my dear friend, Benton, on the other side of the river. So I went towards him to say hello, but he quickly blurted out that he forgot the stove on and had to rush back home. Every day, more lies. He realized I wanted us to have another duel, and he knew that third time's the charm, so he tried saving himself, but to no avail. Can't outrun me through the forest, ya silly goose! It goes without saying that I caught him, but because he was surrounded by soldiers, I had to order my archers to close in and thin the herd, and as soon as I saw Penton break formation, I rushed forth and struck him with my lance, but that wasn't enough, so I was hoping the battle axe would finish the job. It didn't, but as I've just said, third time's the charm. After a taste of my sword, he fell into a deep lethargy, and to be honest, I don't blame him. I too would feel the need to sleep after a 3-course meal of steel. At least he won't have to worry about that stove anymore. Won't be needing any cooking after such a feast. You can probably guess what happened after that, but for those who lack the intuition, let me say it out loud. I put Penton's soldiers to the sword and to the axe, and even flattened a few of them with my horse. And with this victory, I got to tie up another loose end that I've been struggling with since the last chapter. As for the loot, last time I fought this lord, I promised my men that we'll drown in riches. So I was honor-bound to leave the most expensive bits and pieces to them, while I just got the leftovers, which would sell for a few thousand dinars. That's the least I could do for them after failing to beat him twice. Soon as we finished collecting the spoils of war, I made my way over to Tial, where I ransomed Penton and his surviving men, and then sold my plunder, reaching 999,000 dinars. Guess I wasn't ready to be a millionaire yet. Then I ran into my father-in-law, Godon. I guess he got tired of campaigning through Battania, so he returned home to gather the taxes his subjects owed to him. While he would deal with the citizens of his city, I was tasked with collecting the revenue from nearby villages. I've already done this before, so you know how the job goes. And because I'm feeling good after my recent victories, and also because I'm filthy rich, I decided to go easy on the villagers and accept whatever money they're willing to part with. I'll pay the rest of their taxes out of my own pocket, or rather, the pockets of these imperial caravaneers I just caught. When I was ready to turn the income over to my lord, guess who I ran into? My old friend Scarface, who got another fine addition to his collection. I wasn't involved in that fight, so I can't tell you how it went, but I was disappointed to hear that we lost more men to his small warband than we did in the battle at the Cold Gates. But hey, at least the loot was worth it, not really. Anyway, I eventually returned to the city, completed my task, and then paid a visit to the market, where I sold my pilfered wares for another 30k, which finally brought me over the threshold of 1 million dinars. This was a long time in the making, but I am now officially a millionaire. Not bad for someone who started from less than nothing. And with this, I'd say I'm entitled to a little holiday. I need to take a break from all this violence and just enjoy myself a little. But the situation in the city was strange. I can't place my finger on it, but it felt like things are somewhat different. And because of the rising tensions, I decided to equip myself and all of my companions with some decent gear to wear on our next casual stroll through town. And what do you know? As soon as I passed by the pottery shop, I was invited by its owner to discuss an important matter. I don't quite trust criminals. I mean, I am one. I know we are not trustworthy, but I had a companion watch my back while we talked. Apparently, Tiny Lek is a term of respect, because that's what every man wants to be called. Tiny. Anyway, he has a gang dispute with another boss, and he asked my Ironborn for backup. The pay was terrible, but it's the first time I encounter a situation like this. I could use the experience. Only crutch was that I had to wait in town for 4 days until he was ready to make his move. Well, not much for me to do while waiting, except participate in the local tournament. Let me tell you how that went. First round, me and Hosthalamos faced off against Zvana and the Sturgeon Soldier. I was looking forward to beating my wife in the arena, but Pissman beat me to it. Rude. Round 2 was a free-for-all and I had the same teammate. We won that as well. And we also won round 3, which was another 2v2. I carried the Butcher all the way to the finals of the tourney, but it was time for payback for what he did to Zvana. She was mine to beat. As a reward for winning the competition, I was gifted a Battanian thoroughbred horse which fetched about 9,000 dinars. That wasn't the only thing I sold. Each day that I waited, the town merchants brought more money to trade, so I gave them whatever I could. Mostly stolen equipment because everything else sold too cheaply in this town, which was a bit of a problem, because I had a ton of food and animals that were slowing me down and I needed to get rid of. Guess I'll sell those in another town. 4 days after the tourney, Tiny Lek gave the signal to attack. When I met his rival, she offered to double my pay to betray him. Tempting. Unfortunately for her, a couple thousand dinars is not enough to motivate me to break my word. In less than a minute, the fight was already over. A trivial matter, but then again, so was the payment. As a token of thanks for staying true to my word, my new friend informed me about an opportunity to make money like he does. He told me that in certain cities, the alleys and back streets are controlled by gangs such as his, and taking them over could be a profitable endeavor. I remember that. When I made peace with Vlandia and visited a city for the first time, I actually fought one of those gangs. I still got the bag of spice I stole from them. Shame I didn't think to install someone to watch over it. Then again, I don't think I knew anyone capable of doing that back then. Nowadays, I have 2 roguish companions who could probably handle such a task, if we ever run into this opportunity. I doubt it's very profitable, considering how much money I've been paid for this job. If that's what they consider great wealth, these city gangs are several leagues below me. Hell, we're not even playing the same game. Anyway, after I left the city, I spotted a stray Imperial whom I sadly could not catch, because I was slowed down by my prisoners. Before ransoming them, I also noticed a Khuzait lord, and as soon as I regained my mobility, I actually caught him and said, "Beg your pardon, good sir, but would you fancy a little friendly match? My men versus your men. Winner takes all." He was a bit apprehensive, seeing how my party outnumbers his, but I was curious to see how the Khuzaits handled themselves in a fight. If they're anything like the Dothraki, I will regret this decision. Now, the Khuzaits specialize in horse archery, and as you've seen from my recent battles, those units are easily countered by staying behind them and jamming your spear into their backs. So I told my men to assume their standard positions, and I went forth to wait for the skirmishers to do their little strafing run. Imagine my surprise when an entire conga line of them charged into us with melee weapons. Good thing I held my shield high and survived their stampede. But after that, they went back to their usual shenanigans, as they tried shooting arrows while riding off into the sunset. From there, I did what I always do, and it actually went pretty well. But at some point, my horse got injured, and because I didn't want it to die, I dismounted and kicked it off the battlefield, planning to steal another one from the Khuzaits. A few seconds later, I did just that, and I managed to score a few more kills after that. But eventually, I felt like this unarmored horse was too squishy for what I wanted to do next. So I needed to murder a higher tier horseman and steal his mount. Due to a small miscalculation, my target did exactly like Penton in our first duel, and struck me with his sword as we both rode towards each other at high speeds. Needless to say, I was out of commission after neutralizing a mere 9 Khuzaits. From there, my men struggled to maintain cohesion. The cavalry charged foolishly into enemy spears, footmen allowed themselves to be shot, and to put it simply, it was pure mayhem. Maybe I should focus more on commanding battles instead of trying to be a one-man show, with my soldiers playing the role of cheerleaders. Because of my mistakes, the enemy struck down 62 of us before they were defeated, and I lost 30 of my warriors forever. This was not necessarily a Pyrrhic victory, but after my triumphs against the Empire, it certainly feels like it. If this was but a taste of what the Khuzaits have to offer, I am not looking forward to waging war against them. The loot wasn't even that good. As we were rounding up the survivors, both friend and foe, we found Ilatar still breathing. He congratulated me on my victory and surrendered. Bet he was hoping I'd free him, but I said, "Beg your forgiveness, my good sir, but I have to take you prisoner." His ransom would pay for the pain and suffering his soldiers inflicted upon my boys. Speaking of which, I needed to replenish my forces, so instead of going back to the front lines, I returned to Sturgia and recruited whoever I could. Villagers, sea raiders, I didn't care. I also passed through a few towns and managed to sell some of the expensive and heavy cargo I was carrying. The prices were better than in Tial. The port town of Varnovapol was quite enticing, and I decided to spend a few days there to rest, recover and recuperate after my recent tribulations. As I was strolling through town, one particular view caught my eye because it reminded me of my home. No way I can return back there, the trip is nigh impossible. I shall try to leave my mark here in Calradia. Against all odds, I managed to make something of myself, but I'm getting old, my knees are sore, and I'm looking forward to sitting in a comfortable chair. Dreams for the future. Before departing from this town, another crime boss approached me and asked for a favor. He needed weapons for his lads and he'd pay better than the town merchants. I've collected a lot of loot from all the battles I've been in until now, so I had no shortage of axes to give him. After I left, my party was at full strength, so I attacked whoever was unlucky enough to cross my path, such as these gangs of sea raiders and Nicky, my old pal. His horse archers were trivial to deal with, despite their Khuzaitness, and I managed to strike down 18 of his soldiers without even breaking a sweat. But most importantly, my spear had a date with his face. At this rate, he's becoming the biggest scar collector in all of Calradia. Because encountering him always brings a smile to my face, I decided to let him go, but this made me wonder, what the hell was he doing in Sturgia? That question got answered as I approached the city of Tial and saw that Zvana's castle was now imperial property. Sturgia and the Empire are at war. In that moment, I got a stroke of genius. Why don't I conquer that castle and crown myself king? That question also got a quick answer. Because this army of 1,000 men would instantly ride to its defense and wipe us all out. Not even the cliffs of Makeb would help me survive an encounter with such a numerous foe. For the moment, however, my scouts informed me that they're in a rush to get to one of their towns, most likely to defend it against an invading army. So I decided to follow them around, wait until they engage in battle, and while they're preoccupied, come back to Urikskala and claim it for myself. When we got to where they were going, we saw a Sturgian army preparing to assault the imperial city of Umbrella, so my goal was to keep my distance, wait for the Battle of the Giants to commence, and then rush towards my goal. But as we got closer, Zvana recognized her father's banner in front of the Sturgian army and implored me to rush to their aid. Well, I don't have much of a choice, do I? And even if I had a choice, I would choose to help my father-in-law, simply because permanently removing 1,000 Imperials from the equation is better than avoiding them. The Sturgians are slightly outnumbered now, but the odds will be stacked in their favor when my 200 men enter the mix. However, today's chapter has gone on for long enough, and if I tell you how this battle went, then I absolutely have to talk about what comes after, and that would double the runtime, as well as the amount of weeks you would have had to wait for this episode. Besides, if I end this one in a cliffhanger, then I no longer need to waste time with another silly recap. I mean, what's even there to recap? That I made another 250,000 dinars? Drop in the bucket by now, which is a far cry from my first few days on this continent, when I was a penny pincher with no prospects. And now that Balon is done for today, let me address you as Halcylion for a few seconds. This series is almost over, lads. I was hoping I'd be able to end it before the 20th of this month, because a new game is right around the corner and I need to make some videos for it. So I'll be putting episode 15 on hold for a little while, get those videos done real quick, and then we'll be finishing this series, alright? Anyway, we're done for today. Thanks for watching and I'll be seeing you all next time. Bye bye.